The crystal chandelier above table 17 cast fractured rainbows across the white tablecloth, each shard of light trembling like memories Viktor Petrov had tried to bury for 30 years. The billionaire's weathered hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts and shaken with world leaders, now gripped his water glass with the unsteadiness of a man confronting ghosts. «Можете ли вы принести мне еще хлеба, пожалуйста?» The words floated from behind him, spoken in perfect Russian, with the lilting accent of his homeland, the same melodic cadence his daughter Katya had possessed before everything fell apart. Viktor's breathing stopped. The exclusive Manhattan restaurant, Le Bernardin, with its hushed conversations and gentle clink of expensive silverware, seemed to fade into white noise. That voice, young, feminine, carrying the musical quality that only came from those who had learned Russian as a lullaby language, not in classrooms or through translation apps. He had not heard his native tongue spoken with such natural grace since Katya had stormed out of his penthouse 31 years ago, pregnant and furious, choosing love over his empire. "Excuse me, sir, are you all right?" His business associate, Jonathan Mills, leaned forward with concern etched across his face. They had been discussing the acquisition of a renewable energy startup, papers spread across the mahogany table, but Viktor's attention had vanished the moment those Russian words reached his ears. Viktor turned slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. Behind him, a young woman in the restaurant's elegant black uniform moved gracefully between tables, her auburn hair catching the ambient lighting and shades of copper and gold. She couldn't have been more than 25, with high cheekbones that belonged in a Tolstoy novel, and eyes the color of winter storms, the exact same shade of gray-blue that Viktor saw every morning in his own mirror. The waitress was speaking to an elderly Russian couple at table 12, her smile warm and genuine as she explained the evening specials in their native language. Her movements held an unconscious elegance, the way she tilted her head when listening, how her fingers gestured expressively when she spoke. Viktor had seen these same mannerisms 1,000 times in his daughter, and before that, in his beloved wife, Elena. "Sir?" Jonathan's voice seemed to come from another universe. I need a moment." Viktor's voice cracked like autumn leaves. He reached into his jacket pocket with trembling fingers, retrieving a photograph so worn from handling that its edges had softened to velvet. The image showed a young woman with auburn hair and storm-gray eyes, holding a baby girl against her chest. Both mother and child had the same distinctive high cheekbones, the same gentle curve to their lips. Katya and his granddaughter, Anya, a child he had never met, whose existence had been revealed to him only through a private investigator's report that arrived 3 days after his daughter's funeral. The waitress turned, and for one heart-stopping moment, their eyes met across the dining room. In that instant, Viktor saw not just physical resemblance, but something deeper, the stubborn set of the jaw that had defined generations of Petrov women, the way her chin lifted slightly when she felt observed, the guarded intelligence that seemed to catalog and assess everything around her. "Papa always said I had the eyes of a hawk," Katya had told him once when she was 16 and caught him trying to hide his business troubles. "You can't hide things from me, not really." This young woman had those same hawk eyes, and they were studying Viktor with an intensity that made him wonder if she too sensed something familiar in this moment. Jonathan followed Viktor's gaze. "Do you know that waitress?" I'm not sure." Viktor traced the edges of the photograph. "What would you say if I told you I think that young woman might be my granddaughter?" Jonathan's eyebrows shot up. "I'd say you should probably talk to her instead of speculating with me." But Viktor found himself frozen, caught between desperate hope and paralyzing fear. What if he was wrong?
What if 30 years of regret and guilt were making him see connections that didn't exist? Worse, what if he was right, and she hated him as much as Katya had? The waitress moved to another table, this time speaking English with just a slight hint of an accent, enough to suggest that English hadn't been her first language, but had been learned well and spoken often. She laughed at something one of her customers said, and the sound was like silver bells, exactly like Elena's laugh, exactly like Katya's when she was happy. Viktor's mind raced backwards through 30 years of choices and consequences. He had built an empire worth $20 billion, owned properties on 4 continents, and held influence in corridors of power most people could only dream of accessing. But he had also driven away the only family he had ever loved, too proud and stubborn to bend, too convinced that his way was the only way. Katya had been 23 when she fell in love with Marcus, a struggling artist from Brooklyn who painted murals on subway walls and dreamed of gallery showings that might never come. Viktor had forbidden the relationship, threatened to cut off her trust fund, used every tool of power and persuasion at his disposal. "He'll never be able to provide for you," he had shouted during their last fight. "Your money means nothing to me if it comes with chains." Katya had shouted back, her hand protectively over her still flat stomach. "I'd rather be poor and loved than rich and suffocated." She had left that night, taking only a small suitcase and the emerald necklace that had belonged to her mother. Viktor had been certain she would return within a week, humbled and ready to accept his authority. Instead, she had vanished completely, disappearing into the vast anonymity of American cities with a determination that matched his own.
For 3 years, he had used his resources to track her, hiring the best investigators money could buy. They had found traces: a birth certificate in Chicago for Anya Marcus Petrov, medical records showing both mother and daughter healthy, employment records showing Katya working as a translator while Marcus sold paintings at weekend art fairs. But every time the investigators got close, the family moved again, staying just ahead of Viktor's reach. Then, 28 years ago, the trail went completely cold. His investigators found records of Marcus's death in a car accident in Colorado, but no trace of Katya or the child. It was as if they had simply vanished from the world, swallowed by the vast American landscape. Viktor had spent the next 25 years building his fortune and trying to forget, throwing himself into work with the desperate intensity of a man running from his own heart. He told himself they were better off without him, that his money and power only brought complications. He almost succeeded in believing it. Then, 3 years ago, a detective had called with news that shattered his carefully constructed emotional walls. Katya had died in a hospital in Portland, Oregon, alone except for the daughter who had held her hand through the final hours. The investigator had found her through dental records. She had been living under the name Catherine Martin, working as a night shift cleaner to support herself and Anya through community college. She kept the emerald necklace, the detective had told Viktor over the phone. The hospital said her daughter wore it to the funeral. Now, watching this young woman navigate between tables with practiced grace, Viktor's heart hammered against his ribs. Could it be possible? Could the granddaughter he had never met be standing 20 feet away, unaware that her grandfather was one of the wealthiest men in America? The waitress approached their table, order pad in hand and professional smile in place. Up close, the resemblance was even striking. The same delicate bone structure as Elena, the same fierce intelligence in her eyes as Katya, the same slight dimple in her left cheek that appeared when she smiled. "Good evening, gentlemen. Have you decided on dessert, or would you like to see the wine list?" Her voice was music, cultured but warm, with perfect diction that spoke of someone who had worked hard to belong in spaces like this. Viktor found himself speechless, overwhelmed by the proximity of what might be his only living family. Jonathan, sensing his friend's paralysis, stepped in smoothly. "Actually, We were wondering about your background. You spoke Russian earlier. Are you from Russia originally? A shadow crossed the young woman's face. So quickly, Viktor almost missed it. My mother was Russian, she said carefully. I grew up speaking both languages. Your mother? Viktor's voice was barely a whisper. The waitress, her name tag read Anna, studied his face with those storm-gray eyes. Yes, she passed away a few years ago. Why do you ask? Anna, not Anya, but close enough that Viktor's heart lurched. He pulled out the photograph with hands that shook like leaves in a hurricane. Forgive me if this seems strange, but did your mother ever mention the name Katya Petrov? Anna's face went absolutely white. She stared at the photograph in Viktor's hands, the image of her mother holding her as an infant, and her order pad slipped from nerveless fingers to clatter on the floor. Where did you get that picture? Her voice was barely audible, filled with a mixture of shock and something that might have been recognition. I'm Viktor Petrov, he said, his voice breaking on his own name, and I believe, you might be my granddaughter. The elegant restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Other diners continued their conversations, unaware that at table 17, a family was being reborn from the ashes of 30 years of separation and regret. Anna's eyes filled with tears that she blinked back fiercely, her chin lifting in that stubborn Petrov way. You're lying, she whispered, but her voice carried no conviction, only desperate hope and terrified disbelief. Viktor stood slowly, his legs unsteady beneath him. Your mother's full name was Yekaterina Mikhailovna Petrov. She had a birthmark on her left shoulder shaped like a crescent moon. She could speak 4 languages fluently and always hummed Rachmaninoff when she was nervous. She left home when she was pregnant with you because I was too stubborn and proud to accept the man she loved.
With each detail, Anna's face grew paler, her hand rising unconsciously to touch something beneath her uniform collar. How do you— Because she was my daughter, Viktor said, his voice thick with 30 years of unshed tears. And you, God help me, you have your grandmother Elena's eyes and your mother's stubborn heart. You're Anya Petrov, aren't you? My granddaughter. Anna's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled over her cheeks as she pulled a chain from beneath her collar, revealing an emerald necklace that caught the chandelier light like captured starfire. She always told me it belonged to my grandmother, she whispered. She said my grandfather was a man who valued money more than family. The words hit Viktor like physical blows, each one deserved and devastating. She was right, he said quietly. I was a fool who let pride cost me everything that mattered. But Anya, if you'll let me, I'd like to spend whatever time I have left trying to prove that people can change. The restaurant seemed to fade away, leaving only grandfather and granddaughter staring at each other across 30 years of separation, each seeing in the other's face the ghosts of loved ones lost and the possibility of love found again. Jonathan discreetly signaled for the check, understanding that this conversation needed privacy and time. Around them, the dinner service continued, but at table 17, a story was beginning that would reshape 2 lives and honor the memory of the woman who had connected them both. Anna wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, that stubborn chin lifting higher. My mother made me promise never to take money from you if I ever found you. She said the Petrov pride was a curse that destroyed everything it touched. Viktor's heart broke and soared simultaneously. Even in death, Katya was protecting their daughter from the mistakes that had cost them so much. Then we won't start with money, he said softly. We'll start with coffee and stories about the remarkable woman who gave us both life. Anna's hands shook as she untied her apron in the restaurant's employee break room, the familiar routine of ending her shift disrupted by the earthquake of discovery. The emerald necklace felt heavier against her chest now that she knew its history, each facet reflecting not just light, but decades of family secrets. You okay, Anna? You look like you've seen a ghost.
Maria, the hostess, paused in hanging up her uniform jacket. At 55, with graying temples and kind eyes, she had become something of a mother figure to the younger staff. She was one of only 3 people who knew Anna's real story, how she worked 3 jobs to pay for her PhD program in Russian literature at Columbia, how she sent money back to Oregon to maintain her mother's grave, and how she had spent years searching for any trace of the family her mother had left behind. "My grandfather found me tonight," Anna whispered, the words feeling surreal as she spoke them. "The one my mother ran away from 30 years ago." Maria's eyebrows rose. She knew the broad strokes of Anna's family history, that her mother had come from wealth in Russia, that she had chosen love over money, that Anna's father had died when she was very young, leaving mother and daughter to build a life from nothing. "The billionaire," Maria said. It wasn't a question. In their late-night conversations during slow shifts, Anna had shared fragments of her mother's stories about Viktor Petrov, the man who had built an empire but lost his family in the process. Anna nodded, pulling up a news article on her phone. Viktor Petrov's face stared back at her from the screen. Older than in the few photographs her mother had kept hidden, but unmistakably familiar. The same storm-gray eyes, the same sharp cheekbones, the same stubborn set to his jaw that Anna recognized from her own mirror. "He knew things about my mother that no one else could know," Anna said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The way she hummed when she was nervous, the birthmark on her shoulder. He had a photograph of her holding me as a baby." Maria was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the careful attention she gave to everything important. She had immigrated from Mexico 30 years ago, building a life through determination and careful choices. She understood the weight of family history, the way the past could reach across decades to reshape the present.
"What did you tell him?" "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." Anna's hands twisted in her lap. "He wants to have coffee tomorrow. To talk, I don't know what he expects." The break room door opened, and James, one of the line cooks, poked his head in. "Anna, there's a guy out front asking for you. Says he's your grandfather?" Anna's heart lurched. Through the small window in the break room door, she could see Viktor Petrov standing in the restaurant's entrance, looking distinctly out of place in his expensive suit among the staff preparing to close for the night. He held a manila folder in one hand and wore the expression of a man trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "Tell him I'll be right there," Anna managed. James disappeared, and Maria squeezed Anna's shoulder. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. Family money comes with strings, mija. Your mother knew that." Anna stood, smoothing her hair and checking her reflection in the small mirror mounted above the employee lockers. She looked tired, older than her 25 years, wearing the weight of working multiple jobs while pursuing graduate studies, but in her eyes she could see the determined spark that had carried her through community college while her mother worked nights, through the scholarship applications and student loans that had gotten her to Columbia, through the grief of losing the only family she had ever known. "I know," she said quietly, "but she also taught me that running away doesn't solve anything. It just moves the problems to a different location." Viktor was examining the restaurant's wine selection when Anna emerged from the back, his expression suggesting someone trying to occupy his mind with familiar details while processing emotional upheaval. Up close, without the distraction of table service, she could see how the evening had affected him. The slight tremor in his hands, the way his eyes kept darting to her face as if confirming she was real. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me again tonight," he said, his accented English careful and precise. "But I couldn't leave things uncertain." Anna crossed her arms, a defensive gesture she had learned from her mother. "What's in the folder?" Viktor hesitated, then held it out. "Your mother's life, what I was able to piece together after I learned she was gone." Anna's hands trembled as she accepted the folder, feeling its weight. Inside, she knew, would be the story of her mother's years in exile, the jobs, the addresses, the struggle to build a life from nothing while raising a daughter alone.
The thought of her privacy being invaded, even posthumously, made her angry. But stronger than anger was curiosity, the desperate need to understand the full scope of her mother's sacrifice. "She worked so hard," Anna said, her voice thick with emotion, "cleaning offices at night so she could be home when I got back from school, taking translation jobs that paid by the word. She never complained, never made me feel like I was a burden." Viktor's face crumpled with grief and guilt. "She shouldn't have had to work so hard. If I had been less proud, less controlling." "She chose her life," Anna interrupted, that stubborn Petrov chin lifting. "She chose love over money, authenticity over comfort. She was proud of that choice." "As she should have been." Viktor's voice was quiet, filled with a respect that came 30 years too late. "Your father was a good man. I see that now. The investigator's report includes some of his artwork. He was talented, truly gifted." Anna's expression softened slightly. She had only fragments of memory about Marcus, his laugh, the smell of paint on his clothes, the way he would lift her onto his shoulders to see the murals he painted on building walls. Her mother kept some of his canvases, small paintings of city landscapes that captured beauty in unexpected places. "He painted me a mural on my bedroom wall," Anna said, the memory surfacing with perfect clarity. "A forest scene with hidden animals. I spent hours finding new creatures he had hidden in the leaves and branches." Viktor smiled, and for the first time Anna saw warmth in his eyes instead of just guilt and desperate hope. "Your mother wrote about that mural in her journal. She said you would narrate stories about the animals, creating elaborate adventures for them." "She kept a journal." "Several. Viktor hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "They're at my apartment, along with other things she kept, photographs, letters, some of your father's paintings. I had them collected from her belongings after the funeral." Anna's breath caught. She had always assumed her mother's personal effects had been lost or donated, beyond her reach as a grieving daughter with no money for lawyers or estate proceedings. "You went to her funeral?"
Viktor's face went ashen. "No. By the time I learned of her death, she had already been buried. I've regretted that every day since. I should have been there. I should have met you then, should have helped you through that time." The admission hung between them, heavy with implications. Anna studied his face, seeing genuine remorse alongside the desperate hope. This was not the cold, money-obsessed tyrant her mother's stories have described. This was an old man carrying 30 years of regret, searching for redemption that might not be possible. "Why now?" Anna asked. "Why come looking for me?" Viktor was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. "Because I'm 73 years old, and I've spent the last 3 years realizing that all the money in the world can't buy back time. I own buildings and companies and stock portfolios, but I don't have a single person in my life who would miss me if I were gone tomorrow." The honesty was stark, uncomfortable, and I could see the loneliness that wealth hadn't been able to cure, the isolation that came from building walls so high that no one could climb them, not even family. "My mother missed you," Anna said quietly. "Even when she was angry, even when she said she never wanted to see you again, she kept newspaper clippings about your business deals. She would read them and shake her head, but she kept them." Viktor's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. Was she happy? In her life, I mean, despite everything? Anna considered the question carefully, thinking about the woman who had raised her with such fierce love and determination. Catherine Martin had worked multiple jobs and lived in tiny apartments, but she had filled their home with books and music and laughter. She had taught Anna to find joy in small things: the perfect cup of tea, a particularly beautiful sunset, the satisfaction of a well-written paper. She was proud, Anna said finally, proud of the life she built, proud of raising me without compromising her values. She used to say that happiness wasn't about having everything you wanted, but about loving what you had chosen. Viktor nodded slowly, processing this insight into the daughter he had lost. She sounds like her mother. Elena always said that contentment was a choice, not a circumstance. Anna felt a flutter of curiosity about this grandmother she had never known, this woman who had apparently shared her and her mother's philosophy of life. Tell me about her. About my grandmother. Viktor's expression transformed, grief giving way to warmth and love. Elena was extraordinary. She was a translator for the Soviet Foreign Ministry when I met her, fluent in 6 languages. She could discuss Russian poetry with scholars and then explain complex political negotiations to diplomats. She was beautiful, but her mind was what captivated me. How did she die? Cancer, when Katya was 15. It was devastating for both of us, but especially for your mother. They were so close, almost like sisters, despite the age difference. After Elena died, Katya and I only had each other, and I didn't know how to be both father and mother to a grieving teenager. I understand. More about her mother's independence. Catherine had learned early that the people you love could be taken away without warning, that security came from within rather than from external circumstances. She taught me the same things, to be self-reliant, to find strength in education and principles rather than in money or status. Wise lessons, Viktor admitted. I wish I had learned them earlier. The restaurant had grown quiet around them, most of the staff having finished their closing duties and departed for the night. Anna realized they were essentially alone, grandfather and granddaughter meeting for the first time in 30 years, trying to bridge a gap that felt both infinitely wide and surprisingly narrow. The coffee tomorrow. Would you bring the journals? And the photographs? Viktor's face lit up with cautious hope. Of course. Anything you want to see. I have boxes of her things. I wasn't sure what was important, so I kept everything. Anna felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with apprehension. Tomorrow, she would learn more about her mother's private thoughts, would see her father's artwork through adult eyes, would begin to understand the full scope of the life her family had built and lost. There's a cafe near Columbia, Anna said, pulling out her phone to type in the address. Café Sabarsky, in the New Galerie. It's quiet, good for conversation. Viktor entered the address into his own phone, his movements careful and deliberate. What time works for you?
Perfect. Viktor hesitated, then extended his hand formally. Thank you, Anna, for giving me this chance. Anna looked at the offered hand, aged but still strong, bearing a simple wedding ring that had never been replaced despite decades of widowhood. Slowly, she reached out and shook it, feeling the slight tremor that betrayed his emotion. I'm not promising anything beyond coffee, she said, her voice carrying her mother's stubborn strength. I need to understand who you are now, not just who you were 30 years ago. I understand, Viktor said. I'm not the same man who drove Katya away, but I know words are meaningless without actions to support them. Anna watched him leave, his tall figure disappearing into the Manhattan night, taking with him 30 years of family history and the possibility of a future neither of them could yet imagine. In her pocket, the manila folder felt heavy with secrets and stories, with the weight of a life lived in exile and the love that had sustained it. She thought about her mother's final words, spoken in the hospital room where Catherine Martin had died, surrounded only by machines and her daughter's desperate love. Don't hate him, little star, she had whispered, using the Russian endearment she had called Anna since childhood. Hate will eat you alive from the inside. If you ever find him, remember that he lost more than we did. Now, standing in the empty restaurant where her ordinary evening had transformed into something extraordinary, Anna understood what her mother had meant. Viktor Petrov had spent 30 years building an empire, but he had done it alone, without love to give meaning to his success.
He had gained the world and lost his soul. And only now, in the twilight of his life, was he beginning to understand the true cost of his pride. Tomorrow, over coffee and photographs and her mother's private journals, they would begin the delicate work of building something new from the ruins of the past. Anna had no illusions about the difficulties ahead, the weight of history, the differences in their lives and values, the challenge of trusting a man her mother had spent 25 years warning her against. But she also had her mother's strength, her grandmother's wisdom, and her father's artistic eye for finding beauty in unexpected places. If there was a relationship to be built here, she would approach it with the same careful determination that had carried her through graduate school and 3 jobs and the grief of losing the only family she had ever known. The emerald necklace caught the light as she walked toward the subway, its green depths holding reflections of chandeliers and promises and the uncertain hope of family found. The Café Sabarsky existed in a pocket of old-world Vienna transplanted into Manhattan's Upper East Side, its soaring ceilings and dark wood panels creating an atmosphere of timeless elegance. Anna arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table where she could observe the entrance while maintaining some privacy. She had spent the night reading through the manila folder, absorbing the clinical details of her mother's exile. Addresses in 5 different states, employment records showing a pattern of night shifts and manual labor, medical records that revealed the arthritis and chronic fatigue Catherine never complained about. Viktor appeared precisely at 4 o'clock, carrying a leather satchel that looked like it could hold the secrets of nations. He moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent decades in boardrooms where every gesture was calculated, but Anna could see the nervousness beneath his composed exterior, the way his eyes swept the cafes searching for her, the slight hesitation before he approached her table. "You came," he said, and the relief in his voice was so profound that Anna felt an unexpected flutter of sympathy. "I said I would." She gestured to the chair across from her, noting how he moved with the stiffness of someone whose body carried the weight of 73 years and probably more stress than any human was designed to bear. "Did you bring everything?" Viktor set the satchel on the table with the reverence of someone handling sacred artifacts. 3 journals spanning 15 years, 47 photographs, 12 of your father's paintings, and some legal documents that might interest you. Anna's hands trembled as she reached for the satchel's clasp, then stopped. "Before I look at these, I need you to understand something. My mother raised me to be skeptical of wealth, especially inherited wealth. She believed that money that came without work or sacrifice corrupted people, made them think they were entitled to things they hadn't earned." I understand," Viktor said. "She was right to teach you that. I've seen what unearned money does to people, the sense of entitlement, the disconnection from reality, and the way it insulates you from consequences until you forget how to be human. So why do you think I would want any part of that world?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Viktor was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the wooden table surface. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. "Because I don't want you to inherit my wealth. I want you to transform it." Anna's eyebrows rose. "What does that mean?"
Viktor pulled out a legal document from his jacket pocket, the thick paper bearing the letterhead of what was obviously a prestigious law firm. "I've been working with attorneys to establish a foundation, the Petrov Family Foundation, dedicated to supporting first-generation college students, immigrants starting businesses, and artists who create work that builds bridges between communities." Anna stared at the document, recognizing her own values reflected in its mission statement. These were the causes her mother had supported through small donations and volunteer work, the communities they had been part of during their years of struggling to build a life from nothing.
Your mother's journals gave me the idea, Viktor continued. She wrote about the people who helped you both over the years, scholarship committees who took chances on a young single mother, employers who were flexible with schedules, teachers who stayed after hours to help you with difficult concepts. She wanted to build a network of support for people like yourselves, but she never had the resources to make it happen on a large scale. Anna's throat tightened with emotion. The foundation described in these documents was essentially her mother's dream, scaled up to the level that only serious money could achieve. It was a way of honoring Catherine's values while using Viktor's resources for purposes she would have supported. This is, Anna struggled for words, this is what she always talked about doing if she won the lottery, building something that would help people climb the ladder she had to scale without assistance. Then help me make it real, Viktor said quietly. Not as my heir, but as my partner. Bring your mother's wisdom and your generation's perspective to shape how we deploy the resources. Anna felt the weight of possibility settling around her like a mantle. This wasn't the scenario she had imagined when she agreed to meet him, wasn't the power play or emotional manipulation her mother's stories had prepared her to resist. This was something entirely different, an opportunity to honor her mother's memory while making a real difference in the world. But first, she needed to understand the man making the offer. "Show me the journals," she said. Viktor opened the satchel with reverent care, removing 3 leather-bound notebooks that bore the wear of frequent handling. The covers were different colors, deep blue, forest green, and burgundy, and each was filled with Catherine's careful handwriting in both English and Russian. Anna opened the blue journal dated 25 years ago and immediately recognized her mother's voice in the neat Cyrillic script. Anya asked today why we don't live in a big house like her friend Jessica. How do I explain that we could have had a big house, but it would have come with chains? That I chose freedom over comfort, love over security. She's only 3, too young to understand that some prices are too high to pay, even for family. The entry continued with details about Anna's childhood questions, her precocious observations about the world, her fierce independence even as a toddler. Catherine wrote about working late shifts while Anna slept, about the exhaustion that seemed to seep into her bones, about the loneliness of raising a child without family support. But she also wrote about joy, Anna's first word in Russian, her delight at discovering snow, the way that she would create elaborate stories about the people they saw on city buses. Catherine's love for her daughter blazed from every page, fierce and protective and absolutely uncompromising. Viktor watched Anna read the Rubsack Sekov stockwork that blazed from every page. "She wrote about you every few days for 15 years, he said quietly. Every milestone, every challenge, every moment of pride. Reading them, it was like getting to watch you grow up, but from a distance that made it both precious and heartbreaking." Anna flipped through the pages, finding entries about her first day of school, her struggles with math, her discovery of Russian literature in high school. Catherine had documented not just the major events, but the small moments that revealed character. Anna's refusal to let other children cheat off her homework, her tendency to bring home stray animals, her habit of reading under the covers with a flashlight long past her bedtime. "She has Viktor's stubborn streak," she wrote, "but tempered with Marcus's gentleness. She gets angry when she sees injustice, but her anger motivates her to find solutions rather than just complain. I think she's going to change the world someday, this fierce little girl who speaks 2 languages and dreams in colors." Anna's eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. "She was so proud of me." "You had every reason to be," Viktor said. The woman described in these journals raised an extraordinary daughter under circumstances that would have broken many people. Anna turned to the Green Journal, dated 10 years later, finding entries about her high school years and the challenges of being a bright student in underfunded schools. Catherine wrote about working double shifts to pay for Anna's SAT prep courses, about staying up late to help with college applications, and about the fierce pride she felt when Anna earned a full scholarship to community college. The guidance counselor said Anna could probably get into Columbia or NYU if she had the right support and preparation. One entry read, "I see the hunger in her eyes when she talks about studying Russian literature, the way she lights up when she discusses Tolstoy or Dostoevsky. She has inherited the Petrov mind, brilliant and analytical, but she's using it to understand human nature rather than to accumulate power. Maybe that's the difference between her generation and mine." Viktor leaned forward, his voice soft with emotion. "She was planning to help you transfer to a 4-year university. She had been saving money for months, working extra shifts. The financial records show she was putting aside nearly every penny beyond basic expenses."
Anna's heart clenched as she realized how much her mother had sacrificed, how many small comforts she had foregone to build a better future for her daughter. The guilt was overwhelming. All those years she had worried about their tight budget, she had never realized that Catherine was deliberately choosing poverty to invest in Anna's education. "I made it to Columbia anyway," Anna said, her voice thick. "After she died, the financial aid office worked with me to structure a package that covered everything. I've been working 3 jobs to pay for living expenses, but the tuition is covered." "She would be so proud," Viktor said. "Russian literature. She always loved Pushkin and Tolstoy. We used to read together when she was young, before things became so complicated between us." Anna flipped through more pages, finding entries that revealed her mother's inner life beyond her role as a parent. Catherine wrote about her dreams of returning to translation work, about missing the intellectual stimulation of working with multiple languages, about the isolation of existing on the margins of American society. "Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice," one entry read. "Not about leaving Viktor, that was necessary for my soul, but about cutting myself off so completely from that world. Anya is brilliant, but she's growing up without understanding her own heritage, without the cultural richness that could nurture her mind. I've given her freedom, but have I also given her poverty of experience?" The question hung heavy on the page, revealing the doubts that Catherine had never shared with her daughter. Anna realized that her mother had carried the weight of their exile alone, never letting Anna see the moments of uncertainty or regret. She questioned herself, Anna said, surprised by this revelation. "Every Baron does," Viktor replied. "The difference is that most Barons have family support, community, resources to fall back on when they doubt their choices. Katya had only her own judgment and her fierce love for you." Anna turned to the Burgundy Journal, the most recent one, covering the final 3 years of her mother's life. These entries were different, more philosophical, touched with the awareness of mortality that comes with age and illness. Catherine wrote about watching Anna succeed in college, about her pride in her daughter's academic achievements, about her growing certainty that their life of struggle had produced something beautiful and strong. Anya defended her thesis proposal today, a comparative analysis of exile themes in Russian and Latin American literature. The professor said it was graduate-level work. She is going to be accepted to PhD programs, I'm certain of it. She has built a bridge between her heritage and her American experience, finding ways to honor both without being limited by either. This is what I wanted for her, the freedom to choose her own path while carrying the best of what came before. The entry was dated just 6 months before Catherine's death, and Anna could see the deterioration in her mother's handwriting, the tremor that spoke of illness and exhaustion, yet the pride and love blazed as strongly as ever. Viktor produced a manila envelope from the satchel, handling it with particular care. "These are the last things she wrote, letters she never sent." Anna's hands shook as she accepted the envelope, feeling the weight of final words, last thoughts, messages from beyond the grave. Inside were 3 letters, one addressed to Anna, one to Viktor, and one to Marcus, though he had been dead for 25 years. The letter to Anna was brief, but devastating in its love and wisdom. "My dearest Anya, my little star, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you have found the family I left behind. I hope you will judge Viktor not by the man he was 30 years ago, but by the man he has become. People can change, can learn from their mistakes, can find wisdom in their regrets. I have spent 30 years angry at Viktor for his pride and stubbornness, but I realize now that I was equally proud and stubborn in my refusal to allow reconciliation. Love him if you can. He is your family, the last connection to the heritage that shaped you. But love him on your own terms,
with your own boundaries, in ways that honor the woman you have become. All my love, forever, Mama. Anna's tears fell freely now, spotting the careful handwriting that had guided her through childhood homework and teenage heartbreak. Catherine had used her final words to build a bridge between the family members she was leaving behind, to offer forgiveness and hope even as she faced her own ending. Viktor's letter was longer, filled with details about Anna's childhood and achievements, but its emotional core was equally powerful. Viktor, I forgive you, not because you have earned it, but because carrying anger for 30 years has taught me that hatred corrodes the vessel that contains it. You were not wrong to want security for your family, but you were wrong to believe that security could only come through control and wealth. Our daughter is extraordinary. She speaks 4 languages fluently and has read the complete works of Tolstoy in the original Russian and can discuss political theory with the professors who teach her. But more than her intellectual gifts, she has a moral clarity that I think comes from growing up without the corrupting influence of inherited wealth. She will not need your money to succeed in life. I have made certain of that. But she might choose to help you deploy your resources in ways that honor the values Marcus and I tried to teach her. If she makes that choice, support her completely. Follow her moral guidance rather than trying to impose your own vision. You lost a daughter because you could not bend. Do not lose a granddaughter the same way. Catherine. The letter to Marcus was the most personal, filled with private memories and enduring love, but it ended with words that encompassed the entire family. I am sending our daughter back to the family we left behind, armed with your gentleness and my stubborn strength, and hopefully the wisdom to avoid our mistakes. Watch over her from wherever you are. Help her find ways to heal what we broke. Viktor wiped tears from his eyes without embarrassment, his carefully maintained composure completely abandoned in the face of his daughter's final words. She was generous even in death. More generous than I had any right to expect. Anna folded the letters carefully, her mind racing with the implications of her mother's final wishes. Catherine had essentially given her permission, even encouragement, to build a relationship with Viktor, but only if it honored the values they had worked so hard to instill. The foundation, Anna said slowly. Tell me more about how it would work. Viktor straightened, recognizing that they had moved from emotional revelation to practical planning. The initial endowment would be $2 billion, enough to generate substantial annual grants while preserving the principal. We would fund scholarship programs, small business loans for immigrants, grants for community art projects, and support for organizations that help first-generation college students navigate higher education. Anna's mind raced with possibilities. $2 billion, deployed strategically, could transform thousands of lives, could build the network of support that her mother had dreamed of creating. It was exactly the kind of project that would honor her mother's memory while making real change in the world. I would want oversight, Anna said slowly, her voice carrying the stubborn strength that had carried her through graduate school and multiple jobs. Not just advisory input, but real decision-making authority. And I'd want the programs designed by people who have actually experienced the challenges we're trying to address. Viktor nodded eagerly. Of course, I have money and business experience, but you have lived the reality we are trying to impact. Your judgment would be essential. Anna was quiet for a long moment, considering the magnitude of what was being offered. This was not just wealth, but responsibility. The chance to honor her mother's values on a scale that could reach thousands of families like theirs. There would be conditions, she said finally. I finish my PhD first. The foundation doesn't interfere with my academic work or my career plans.
And we start small, with pilot programs that we can evaluate and refine before scaling up.
Whatever you think is best, Viktor said. This is your mother's vision as much as mine. I want to honor her wisdom, not impose my own ideas. Anna felt something shifting in her chest, a cautious opening toward the possibility of family, of healing, of transformation. This man was not the tyrant her mother's stories had described. He was a grieving father and grandfather, trying to find redemption through service, attempting to build something meaningful from the ruins of pride and regret. "I'll need to see your financial records," Anna said, surprising herself with the practical direction of her thoughts. "All of them. If we're going to do this, I need to understand exactly how the money was made and whether any of it was earned through practices that would conflict with our mission." Viktor smiled, and Anna saw approval in his eyes. "Spoken like Catherine's daughter. Yes, complete transparency. I'll have my accountants prepare a comprehensive overview of all my holdings and how they were acquired." They spent the next 2 hours going through the photographs and examining Marcus's paintings, small canvases that captured the beauty Viktor had been too proud to see 30 years ago. The artwork revealed a gifted observer of human nature, someone who found profound meaning in everyday moments. Anna could see why her mother had chosen love over luxury, why she had believed that authentic connection mattered more than financial security. As the afternoon sunlight slanted through the cafe's tall windows, casting golden patterns on their table, Anna felt the weight of decisions settling around her. She could walk away from this opportunity, could honor her mother's independence by maintaining their family's separation from Viktor's world, or she could choose the harder path, building something new from the fragments of the past, using privilege to create opportunities for others who faced the same challenges she and Catherine had navigated. "I need time to think," she said finally. It's more than I expected." Viktor nodded, carefully repacking the journals and photographs. "Take all the time you need. But Emma, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Would you consider having dinner with me next week? Not to discuss the foundation, just to get to know each other. I missed 30 years of your life. I'd like to understand the woman my granddaughter has become." Anna studied his face, seeing genuine curiosity and affection alongside the desperate hope. He was asking for connection, not just collaboration, the chance to build a relationship that went beyond shared projects and mutual benefit. Next Friday, but somewhere simple. No places with crystal chandeliers and $20 appetizers. Viktor laughed, a sound of pure delight. "I know a wonderful Russian restaurant in Brighton Beach, the kind of place where your grandmother would have felt at home. Family recipes, reasonable prices, and music that carries the soul of our homeland." Anna felt a flutter of anticipation, curiosity about this heritage she had only experienced through her mother's stories and the Russian poetry she studied in school. "That sounds perfect." As they prepared to leave, Viktor hesitated, then pulled out a small velvet box. "This belonged to your grandmother. Elena wanted Katya to have this when she got married, but circumstances prevented that. I think she would want you to have it now." Inside the box was a simple gold ring set with a small diamond. Elegant in its understated beauty, it was clearly an engagement ring, worn smooth by decades of wear and love. "I can't accept this," Anna said, though her fingers longed to touch the ring that had symbolized her grandparents' love. "It is not a gift," Viktor said gently. "It's an inheritance, part of your family history. Elena always said that jewelry should be worn and loved, not locked away in safes or bank vaults." Anna lifted the ring from its velvet nest, feeling its weight. Substantial, but not ostentatious. Beautiful, but not flashy. It was exactly the kind of piece her mother would have appreciated, valuable for its emotional significance rather than its monetary worth. She would want you to have something that connects you to the women who came before you. Elena, Katya, and now you. 3 generations of Petrov women, each one stronger and wiser than the last. Anna slipped the ring onto her right hand, where it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting 30 years to find its way back to family. The metal was warm against her skin, carrying the memory of love and commitment, and the hope that broken things could be mended. "Thank you," she said simply. Viktor's eyes shone with unshed tears. "Thank you for giving me the chance to know you. Whatever you decide about the foundation, whatever kind of relationship we build, I'm grateful that I got to meet the remarkable woman my granddaughter has become." They walked out of the cafe together, grandfather and granddaughter, carrying between them 30 years of separation and the fragile beginning of something new. The late afternoon Manhattan streets buzzed with energy and possibility, and Anna felt as if she was seeing the city with new eyes. Not just as the place where she worked and studied, but as the beginning of a story that could honor the past while building something beautiful for the future.
He was having gallery showings, Viktor said quietly. Small venues, but legitimate exhibitions. The investigator found reviews in local papers, all positive. He was building a reputation, starting to sell pieces to collectors. Anna studied the photographs. The emerald necklace and Elena's ring caught the sunlight as Anna walked toward the subway. Their combined weight, a reminder that family legacy could be a source of strength rather than burden, that love could transcend time and pride and the mistakes that seemed unforgivable until forgiveness became possible. 6 months later, Anna stood in the renovated brownstone that housed the Petrov Family Foundation, watching Viktor review grant applications with the intense focus he had once reserved for billion-dollar mergers. The building itself told the story of their evolving relationship, elegant but not ostentatious, filled with natural light and comfortable spaces where scholarship recipients could meet with mentors, where immigrant entrepreneurs could access business planning resources, where community artists could collaborate on projects that bridged cultural divides. The application from the Somali Women's Collective in Minneapolis is particularly impressive, Viktor said, looking up from his tablet. They want to create a textile cooperative that employs recent immigrants while preserving traditional weaving techniques. It combines economic empowerment with cultural preservation. Anna smiled, recognizing how much her grandfather had changed in these months of working together. The man who had once measured success purely in financial terms now spoke passionately about social impact, about the ripple effects of supporting one family's dream to lift an entire community. "My mother would have loved that project," Anna said, settling into the chair across from his desk. She always believed that the most powerful interventions honored people's existing strengths rather than trying to impose outside solutions. The foundation had awarded its first grants 3 months ago, focusing on pilot programs they could monitor and refine. 20 scholarships to first-generation college students, microloans to 15 immigrant-owned small businesses, and grants to 8 community art projects that brought together people from different cultural backgrounds. The results had exceeded their most optimistic projections. Viktor had insisted on visiting every grant recipient personally, a practice that had transformed him as much as it helped the people they supported. Anna watched him interact with scholarship recipients and saw him rediscover the joy of mentorship, the satisfaction of watching young minds flourish when given opportunity and encouragement. "The quarterly reports came in yesterday," Anna said, pulling out her own tablet. "The retention rate for our scholarship recipients is 95%, compared to the national average of 68% for first-generation college students. The difference seems to be the mentorship component and the emergency fund we established for unexpected expenses." Viktor's face lit up with pride. "Your idea to pair each scholarship recipient with both an academic mentor and a professional mentor was brilliant.
It addresses the social capital gap that often prevents first-generation students from succeeding even when they have financial support. The success of their programs had attracted attention from other philanthropists, leading to invitations to speak at conferences and requests for guidance from families wanting to establish their own foundations. Anna found herself becoming an advocate for what she called participant-driven philanthropy, funding strategies developed by people who had lived the challenges they were trying to address. The conference in Chicago next month. I think you should be the primary speaker. These people need to hear from someone who understands poverty and struggle, not just from an old man who learned about social justice late in life. Anna considered the invitation, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with representing not just their foundation, but a different approach to wealth and its obligations. I'll do it, but I want to bring Maria with me. She's been thinking about starting a foundation focused on hospitality workers, people who work multiple jobs to support their families while dealing with unpredictable schedules and no benefits. Viktor nodded approvingly. The restaurant industry employs millions of people in situations similar to what you and your mother experienced. Maria's perspective would be invaluable. Their relationship had evolved far beyond the foundation work, developing into something that felt authentically like family. Viktor had kept his promise about starting small and maintaining boundaries, never pressuring Anna to spend more time together than felt comfortable, never trying to use money to accelerate emotional intimacy. Friday dinners at the Russian restaurant in Brighton Beach had become a cherished tradition, opportunities to share stories about their weeks, to explore their shared heritage, and to gradually build the kind of connection that couldn't be rushed or forced. I have something to show you, Viktor said, pulling out a manila envelope similar to the one that had started their journey 6 months ago. The private investigator found more of your father's artwork. Inside the envelope were photographs of murals Marcus had painted in the years before his death, large-scale works on building walls in Chicago and Denver, pieces that transformed urban landscapes with images of hope and human connection. The artwork was sophisticated, powerful, clearly the work of a mature artist who had found his voice.
With growing emotion, seeing her father's talent fully realized, understanding for the first time the scope of what he might have achieved with more time. My mother never told me he was becoming successful. Perhaps she didn't want you to feel that his death robbed him of recognition he deserved. Or perhaps she was protecting you from wondering what your lives might have been like if he had lived to achieve financial stability through his art. The thought was bittersweet. Marcus had been on the verge of proving that love and art could provide security, that Viktor's concerns about his ability to support a family had been misplaced. But Anna realized that dwelling on alternate histories served no purpose beyond causing pain. I'd like to organize an exhibition of his work, a retrospective that honors his artistic vision while raising funds for the Foundation's arts programs. Viktor's eyes shone with enthusiasm. I know gallery owners who would be honored to host such an exhibition. We could create a scholarship program specifically for young artists from working-class backgrounds, funded by sales of his pieces. The thought felt right, a way of honoring her father's memory while supporting others who shared his passion for art as a tool for social connection and community building. It would also give Anna a chance to learn more about this side of her heritage, to understand the artistic vision that had captured her mother's heart. There's something else, Viktor said, his voice carrying a note of nervousness that Anna had learned to recognize as a precursor to emotionally significant conversations. I've been thinking about what happens to the Foundation when I'm gone, about ensuring that your mother's vision continues to guide its work even after my death. Anna felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. Despite their growing closeness, discussions of Viktor's mortality reminded her how much loss she had already experienced, how fragile family connections could be. You're 73, not 93. We have time to figure out succession planning.
Viktor smiled at her protective response. I hope so, but I also want to make sure the Foundation's mission is legally protected, that future board members can't redirect the funds toward causes that would contradict your mother's values. He pulled out another set of legal documents, these bearing the signatures of multiple attorneys and bearing official seals that suggested considerable preparation and thought. I've established an irrevocable trust that transfers my entire estate to the Foundation upon my death, with specific guidelines about its mission and operations. You would become the primary trustee, with full authority to hire staff and make strategic decisions. The board would be advisory only, unable to override your judgment about grant recipients or program development. Anya stared at the documents, understanding that Viktor was essentially leaving her one of the largest philanthropic foundations in the country, along with the responsibility for ensuring it honored the values that had shaped her life. That's an enormous responsibility. It's also the fulfillment of your mother's dreams on a scale she never imagined possible, Viktor said gently. Catherine wanted to build a network of support for people climbing out of poverty. This foundation, properly managed, could do that for thousands of families every year for generations to come. Anya thought about her mother's journals, about the entries where Catherine had written about her frustration with having vision but lacking resources, about her dreams of creating systematic change rather than just helping individuals one at a time. I'd like to expand the mission eventually. Beyond scholarships and small business loans, I'd want to fund research into policy changes that could address structural inequality, support advocacy organizations working for systemic reform. Viktor nodded approvingly. Your generation understands that individual charity, while necessary, isn't sufficient to address problems that require legislative solutions. The Foundation should absolutely evolve to support policy change as well as direct service. They spent the afternoon reviewing the legal documents, discussing implementation strategies, planning for a future that honored the past while adapting to changing needs. Anya found herself thinking about her mother's final letter, about Catherine's encouragement to transform Viktor's empire into something that honored love rather than just accumulating power. That evening, as they walked along the Brooklyn Heights promenade after dinner, watching the Manhattan skyline reflect in the East River, Anya felt the weight of her family's history settling into something that felt like peace rather than burden. I've been thinking about graduate school, about whether I should finish the PhD or focus entirely on the foundation work. Viktor was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. What does your heart tell you? That I can do both, Anya said. That the academic research will make me better at the foundation work, and the foundation experience will enrich my scholarship. I'm writing my dissertation on exile narratives in literature, stories about people forced to leave their homelands and build new identities in foreign places. The foundation work is essentially about helping people write successful exile narratives, creating opportunities for immigrants and first-generation Americans to thrive rather than just survive. Viktor smiled, recognizing the connection between Anya's intellectual interests and their practical work. Your mother would be proud that you found the way to honor both your academic gifts and your commitment to social justice. As they walked, Anya touched the emerald necklace at her throat and Elena's ring on her finger, feeling the weight of family history transformed from burden into strength. She thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment, from a waitress working multiple jobs to support her education, to the steward of resources that could transform thousands of lives. I have a confession, she said. Sometimes I feel guilty about how much my life has changed. 6 months ago, I was worried about paying rent and buying textbooks. Now I have access to resources that most people can't even imagine. Viktor stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression of deep understanding. Survivor's guilt is real, Anya. I felt it when my business started succeeding while other Russian immigrants struggled to find work. The question isn't whether you deserve your current opportunities. The question is what you're going to do with them. And what am I going to do with them? You're going to honor your mother's memory by making sure other families don't have to struggle the way you and Catherine did. You're going to use privilege to create opportunities for people who deserve chances but lack access. You're going to prove that wealth can be a tool for justice instead of just a symbol of inequality. Anna felt the truth of his words settling in her chest, replacing guilt with determination, anxiety with purpose. She thought about the scholarship recipients she had met, about the immigrant entrepreneurs whose businesses were thriving with foundation support, about the community artists who were building bridges between cultures through collaborative projects. The conference in Chicago, I want to announce the Marcus Petrov Scholarship for Young Artists, and I want to commit to doubling our grant funding over the next 5 years. Viktor's face blazed with pride and approval. Catherine would be so proud of the woman you've become. You've taken the best of what our family had to offer while avoiding the mistakes that cost us so much time together. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the lights of Manhattan twinkle across the water, each lost in thoughts about the journey that had brought them to this moment of peace and possibility. Anna realized that the story she had always told herself about her family, that they were refugees from wealth and privilege, that they had chosen poverty to preserve their integrity, was only part of the truth. The fuller truth was that they were part of a larger narrative about redemption and transformation, about the possibility of learning from mistakes, about the ways that love could bridge any distance if people were willing to be vulnerable enough to accept forgiveness and offer it in return. The emerald necklace caught the street light as Anna descended into the subway, its green depths holding reflections of chandeliers and promises and the certain hope of family found, healed, and transformed into something beautiful enough to honor all the love that had made it possible.